I had shit internet connection.
There you go. You probably need decent Wi-Fi. We're live. Yeah. It says live.
What says live?
Right. By Pat's head. Live via Facebook.
Okay, are we live? Chris Neville is live in British Bourbon Society. Thank
there
God for that. Right, okay. Right. Hello, everybody. Apologies for the lateness. We did have some technical issues, which it seems, fingers crossed, we now have sorted. Joined tonight, very grateful to be joined by as well, Dr. Pat Heist from Wilderness Trail. And of course, our very own Andrew Watson. I am going to try and keep an eye on this stream and make sure that it keeps working. So I don't know if you want to take over for now, Watson.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've done a bunch of chatting before we got this working about a whole bunch of stuff like movies. I feel that we've kind of used our best chat for not being live. But where do we start? So, Pat, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you guys are up to right now? Obviously, we're not going to go too much into the situation, but it'd be interesting to hear what you guys are doing at the minute. Obviously, people are working from home. What does working from home look like to you? If that even exists for Wilderness Trail, and what you guys are doing at the distillery?
Yeah, so right now, the only part of our operation that is affected is, we're on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. As of three or 4 weeks ago, we became the 18th member of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. And so our visitor center is shut down and our tours are suspended for right now. But in terms of our production, which we're up to about 215 barrels a day on production, that's still full speed ahead. And, with the current, health crisis going on, we've actually shifted a little bit of our focus over to hand sanitizer production. So that's kind of, just today we made, I think, 400 or 500 gallons of hand sanitizer that we've been distributing to the local health department, and they're sending that to local hospitals and, people in need. And we've actually, I think, got plans to make another several thousand gallons of that over the next several days. So, outside of tours and our visitor center, we're full speed ahead here at Wilderness Trail.
That's great to hear. And I think we were speaking earlier that you're in a unique position with your experience, that you've been able to kind of provide some expertise in the field of in the field of biochemistry as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So on that point, do you get people asking you questions and about what how to deal with things at their distilleries? We're not talking. We're not. I don't mean people at home. I mean, do other distilleries use you as a soundboard for what maybe they could be doing as well in this situation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My business partner Shane Baker, he's very active in the Kentucky Distillers Association, and has, played a leadership role in a lot of the current discussions around. The other distilleries also are making hand sanitizer. And so, we've been, we have our other company that sells yeast to distilleries. And so we have a unique link to fuel alcohol distilleries. And right now, where gas prices and gas consumption is way down, those guys are kind of hurting a little bit too. So we've been funneling some of their product into distilleries that can make hand sanitizer. So, kind of helps us out, helps them out. And, puts us in a position to where, we're kind of directing traffic on a lot of the ingredients that go into making hand sanitizer. So, in that regard, my background is in microbiology. I used to be a medical microbiology professor. And so, we've been fielding a lot of questions from other distilleries around, hey, man, do we need to be worried about the coronavirus getting into whiskey? Or, back when tours were still open, how long do we need to bleach the whole facility? Do we need to do all this kind of stuff? So we've also kind of been in an advisory role on, helping with interpreting, what do you really need to do? And then what is just kind of public hype over, over the situation. So yeah, we've been communicating with a lot of different distilleries and, giving advice as much as we're able.
Excellent. With your background, I want to kind of see if this is true as well. I've heard a lot about 120 proof whiskey being a what do you call it? A sanitizer. Is that true? If I drink it, is that kind of 120?
Well, I mean, you're sanitizing.
Does that help?
You're sanitizing your lips and you're sanitizing your mouth and your throat. So I guess technically it could be. Now, typical hand sanitizer, it has a gel component there, and that helps to, if you just rub alcohol on your hands, you're going to dehydrate your skin. So there are other components to hand sanitizers that incorporate softeners like glycerol or aloe gel, those kind of things. So you've got the sanitizing effect of the alcohol, but you're not drying your skin out at the same time. So there are multiple components that go into that. And so, it's just straight alcohol technically isn't approved, at least here, as a hand sanitizer. Now it could be a sanitizer for surfaces in terms of just it is a sanitizer, but whether or not it's approved for that use, you kind of have to dig a little deeper into different states and different countries in terms of what is acceptable as a sanitizer.
Yeah, got you. Yep. But listen, you're probably tired of speaking about hand sanitizer, given the fact that you're making a shed load of it, right? So why don't we move on to whiskey and talk about what you guys are doing at the distillery at the minute in terms of new barrels, new things you're working on. Over to you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're up over 200 barrels a day on production. Our goal is to put back around 25 to 30,000 barrels for Wilderness Trail brands this year. And then we do a good bit of contract production for other brands and other, investment groups and different things. So we are, still full steam ahead. I don't know that really we've been doing that now for over a year. So everything's kind of status quo on our production. Chris was asking earlier, had we built any new rick houses? And I think we've probably got maybe 2 more on site since the last time you guys were here. But that's kind of really the most activity that we're into right now is building barrel warehouses that keep up with our production. So we've just acquired some property across the street from us, about 120 acres that we just completed the site work on. And it looks like we're going to be able to put about 11 more barrel warehouses over there, which will get us through the next 3.5 years. And hopefully it'll take us up to the point to where we're putting, taking out as many barrels as what we're putting back in. So, 3 or 4 years down the road, unless we significantly increase our production, which we're at, about a 65 to 70,000 barrel per year production, that should be close to doing us for our storage. But that's a big deal. Our bottling right now, where we're getting into more and more barrels every year. We just completed our first automated bottling line. So that's something that we've been working on. Shane, he's, more over on that kind of stuff. I get in there and I see all those different, little things blowing air on a label and pushing the bottle down the line. And I'm just totally confused. I mean, let's talk about molecular biology and genetics, and I'm fine. But you get into all that inner workings of an automated bottling line, and I'm completely useless.
Yeah. How does you got any other plans for the visitors center then, with the added capacity of your facility? Are you intending to expand upon that, or?
Well, we've just completed an expansion about little over a year ago. And so really what it is now that we're on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, being able to accommodate all the visitors. And so we've been hiring a lot of new staff to, take us through the week and into the weekend. And, currently we are giving tours 5 days out of the week, which is Monday through Saturday. And so, as time goes on and we're gauge, how many new customers and how many new tourists we're going to get, we'll look at probably opening that up for Mondays and Sundays as well. So those are the main things.
Well, I've got a question for you about something that's quite probably dear to the BBS, because it's around whiskey investment, and it's. I noticed that you've partnered with Wave Financial, which is it'd be great to hear from you what that is. But it's you're partnering with a company to utilize whiskey barrels as an investment using Bitcoin, right? Distributed ledger technology.
Yeah, I just saw where that article came out like today, I think. So, that's really not new for us in terms of producing barrels for investment groups, but the way that they're going about it might be a little different than we've gone, as far as, how they're raising the capital to do that. That's more over probably on their side. And then once they get the capital, then, we start kicking in kind of business as usual, as we've done with other groups. So, we're probably less concerned about how they're getting their money. Is once they get it, what are we going to do with it in terms of making barrels for them? But, we have been doing that for a while, and that is something that seems to be up and coming. And, and if somebody wants to invest in barrels today, and is simply in it for an investment, I mean, that would certainly be something that we would be interested in looking at, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. We would be happy to pull those barrels back. And really, we're not pulling them back because they're here on site. So, we have the option of pulling some of those barrels back into our own, for our own brands. So that just helps us right now in terms of capitalizing. That's just that many more barrels we don't have to pay for today they're going to be aging over time. And we don't, that's a good deal for us all the way around.
With the barrels aging and then used as an investment in a fund, how does it work with the evaporation of the whiskey? How does that?
Well,
how's that monitored? And
whiskey is just going to happen, and you just kind of got to look. If I'm an investor and I'm going to invest in barrels, I'm going to be leery of what distillery is going to make those for me and what type of a climate are those barrels going to be aging in? Because, as a yeast supplier, we work with over 500 different distilleries currently. And we know that in some of the drier areas, some of those guys are seeing a 20 to 25% evaporative loss per year. We see about a 2% to 3% per year. And that's why Kentucky's such a great place to make it. But there is concern, if I was going to invest in barrels, I wouldn't want to be investing in a location where there's a potential in 4 years, there's not going to be anything left in the barrel.
But then conversely to that, does the less whiskey in the barrel, does it make it rarer or more exclusive and more expensive because then it becomes a limited release? I don't know.
Well, if you get down to 3 or 4 bottles in that barrel, you're going to have to sell those bottles for thousands of dollars to recoup your money. So in that respect, it could be a big problem. There's a lot of speculation, even though you can make bourbon anywhere in the United States, currently Kentucky still makes 95+% of the world's bourbon supply. So, and that just goes to show you that Kentucky, it has the perfect climate for it. And so, that's just, so we're very fortunate to have that. I just actually posted a TED talk that I gave a couple weeks ago on out in Reno, Nevada, on the effects of climate change on bourbon production. So if anybody's interested in checking that out, I just posted it on my Facebook page, and I'm sure the distillery will be posting it as well. But it's a pretty short, about a 10-minute talk, and it's a good little synopsis, kind of outlining specifically how humidity and temperature affect things like evaporative loss, how chemical reactions are occurring over time in terms of, what's going on in that barrel over time. And also a couple of comments about how climate affects the quality of the barrels. You know, you got the trees growing in the woods. Obviously, those are dependent on climate. At the barrel production facilities, I mean, a lot of people, you know, you look at barrel production as a very ancient form of production, you know, and the fact is it's very scientific. The quality of the barrel has a lot to do with not only the quality of the wood, but also that wood, the staves are often, like our barrels, we get barrels that the staves were air dried for 18 to 24 months prior to construction of the barrel. And what that does, you basically palletize the staves. And the presentation that I posted, it has pictures of the staves stacked outside, and Independent Stave, that's who we get all of our barrels from. But, you know, those staves are sitting outside in the rain and undergoing seasonal climate. And some things that happen during that aging process is you get volatilization of things like tannins. It's also called deacidification of the wood. So tannins volatilize. So you don't have, I mean, tannins can lend kind of an acidity to the bourbon if you don't air dry the staves for a certain period of time. Now you can outrun that with more time in the barrel, but like, you know, where most distilleries, especially new distilleries, I mean, they're trying to get some revenue. If they're waiting 4 years, you know, that's a long time to be waiting. But, you know, you might have to wait longer than 4 years if you don't have barrels that are made with properly air-dried wood. So you have volatilization of tannins. That's something that happens. You also have, there are actually fungi that grow on the surface of the staves, and those fungi liberate enzymes that break down wood components, very large wood chemicals, into smaller particles that are more easily extracted from the wood. And that is also important. You know, another thing that happens is that as those staves set outside, is it increases the porosity of the wood. So, you know, as those fungi kind of grow on the wood and as it sort of seasons, you get kind of increased porosity of the wood, and it allows the whiskey to more easily absorb into the wood. And then as you get, you know, hot summer conditions and cold winter conditions, that allows the, you know, expansion and contraction of that whiskey in the barrel. And so all these things together facilitate the aging and the maturation of the bourbon. So, you know, there's a lot of science that goes on even prior to us putting whiskey into that barrel. So, you know, a lot of different things going on relative to the climate. And Kentucky climate is not only good for the whiskey as it's in the barrel, it's also good for maturing those staves prior to construction of the wood, as well as providing quality oak trees to get the staves from.
Just to pitch in a second, I don't know if you're okay to do this now. I've got a few questions from people watching the video in the group and stuff.
Yeah.
We're happy to go to some of those questions now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First one that we've got is pretty straightforward. I'm not sure if there's a straight answer. Maybe you covered some of this from Chris Clayton. How do they make their rye so freaking good?
Well, a little tender loving care and, you know, a little bit of science and definitely a little bit of luck. No, that's something that I'll tell you, man, something about our rye whiskey. A lot of people don't realize it, but there's several different things that are unique about our rye. And not saying that other distilleries aren't making great rye, because, you know, any of the distilleries here in Kentucky make really good rye whiskey. But some things that are unique about our rye, first of all, we are one of the only distilleries, or just a select few here in Kentucky, that use Kentucky grown rye. So that's one thing that's a bit unique about us. Most of the larger distilleries get their rye from out of state, which it grows better in other states. But where we are contracted with a local farmer and we've been able to work with them, my PhD is actually in plant pathology. So, you know, the interaction between microorganisms that cause plant disease, that's one of the reasons why you can't grow, or where rye is not often grown in Kentucky, is because with the humidity and the temperatures we have, there are a lot of plant diseases that can affect the rye. And, you know, you go back to the old days, you know, the Salem witch trials and all that kind of stuff. when they were growing rye, which got ergot. That's a disease of rye that produces a fungal structure that replaces the rye grain. And it actually, if you were living back in those days, and it's pretty well controlled nowadays, but, if you were alive back in those days, poorer people ate rye, more wealthy people ate wheat. And so you had this situation. So not only were people ingesting this ergot structure, this fungal structure that replaced the grain, that fungus produces LSD-like compounds. So,
nice.
Not only you got people acting a little bit strange, but it also causes vasoconstriction. So if you got a group of people that are kind of running around acting a little crazy because they're essentially on LSD, well, if their nose falls off or their fingers start getting gangrene, then they must be a witch. So it's kind of one of those things.
But this grows where? Sorry, does this grow by your?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I have a tube about this full of ergot, but I don't think that's going to supply the world with anything. But back to your question about why is our rye so damn good? That's one reason. And the other thing is we go into barrels that have been extended air dried. Most Kentucky distilleries go into a 3 to 6 month air dried barrel. So those are a couple reasons. And then we also go in at a fairly low entry proof. So between 100 and 110. And that's another thing that just lends to a really great tasting rye.
Do you use a sweet mash for this as well?
Yep, we use sweet mash for everything that goes into a Wilderness Trail bottle. Speaking of which, I'm gonna have to pour a little bit of got some wheat in here.
Me too. I got our barrel.
I got the rye.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get a little bit here. This is gonna protect me from any.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
we call it medicine through these times.
That's right.
We've got another question from somebody else, if that's okay.
Yeah.
We got Aaron, who's one of the guys up in Manchester who came to the tasting that you guys did for us last year, I think it was. And he's put, when you came to Manchester for the tasting, we've talked about this today, actually, Pat. When you came to Manchester for the tasting, you mentioned bringing a bourbon over and aging it in the UK. That was obviously the Never Say Die that you talked about. Can you give us a little bit of an update about that?
Yeah, so that we're on our, I believe, 4th year of production on that. So very soon so the idea there is, for those of you who don't know, it's based around a racehorse that was raised here in Kentucky, and it won the English Derby in, I believe, 1956. And it's one of the first American-bred thoroughbreds to win that race. And it was a big turning point for the thoroughbred industry here in the United States. And so this is kind of a homage to that particular horse. So we're making the whiskey here. We're sending it over to Great Britain to finish aging and then releasing it over there. And then the second part of that story, there was a lady from Liverpool that, for whatever reason, felt compelled to bet on that horse, and she pawned her jewelry and won a small fortune. And her son played in a famous band over there, which you guys probably know who that is. But her name was Mona Best, and her son was Pete Best, the original drummer for the Beatles. So there's pretty good, there's a horse race tie-in, there's Beatles tie-in. I'm a huge Beatles fan. That's probably some of the first music that ever hit my ears. My mother was a big Beatles fan, saw them several times over here. Now, personally, my kids listen to Slayer because that's my favorite band. But, back to the Never Say Die story, that's something that we're doing. So we're in our 4th year of aging the barrels here, and we're looking for a spot. If anybody's got room in their basement and want to move in about 1,600 barrels and keep a good eye on for us, let us know.
You might have a few volunteers in the group.
Yeah. All in favor?
Yeah. Okay. We got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
I'll pick a couple out. Yeah, I guess maybe you've covered a little bit of this one from Dean Smith. He's put, without spilling their trade secrets, how do they manage to make young whiskey taste so old? Is the single most surprising thing. I think many just couldn't believe how balanced and aged such a young whiskey was.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate that. I mean, that's, starting off, there's no such thing as a good tasting 1 year old. And at 1 year old, year and a half, I mean, we were in there day one trying the stuff, and day 2, day 3, day 4. So getting up into, that 3+ years, we were so proud that it started tasting so good. But one of the things I believe that helps us out, not only having a mastery of the process, we work with hundreds of other distilleries on troubleshooting, and we had experience in hundreds of other distilleries before we started ours. And so, having that expertise to be able to have really good consistency helped us a lot. I think, our choice to do a sweet mash process and to be able to do that successfully, that adds a lot of consistency. And then, as I was mentioning, the fact that we use older air-dried wood for our barrels, that I think is also a big deal. And here on our site, I mean, it's one thing to look at a barrel warehouse and just see that as a structure that you use to store barrels, but it makes a big difference where those are located. So not only are those buildings highly engineered to, properly age whiskey, but we have them located here on our property in very strategic locations. Some are east to west facing, north to south. Some are kind of diagonal. We have really nice prevailing winds here on our property. And, a lot of that, I'd hand over the credit immediately to Shane, because he's an engineer and he does a lot of that kind of stuff. And then Busick Construction, the company that builds our barrel warehouses. I mean, those guys essentially build almost all the traditional, actually, I think they might build all of the traditional aging rick houses here in the state, and have for, over 100 years. So, all those things together helps us to have a really consistent whiskey, and it tastes good at that, 4+ year mark.
I've got a question on that point. So rye, to your point, does very well at young age, but what's the magic number, do you think, for Wilderness Trail rye, given the fact that it also does well at higher, longer aging?
Given the fact we don't have anything older than 5 years old right now on our rye, I don't have any data outside of up to 5 years. Now, our rye, it tastes really good, and if the flavor you guys are talking about and are enjoying, it gets there a little over 3 years. So, I think that is where you start getting real high quality. Now, over time, as we continue that, you see more shrinkage. I think you'll see more concentrated flavors, as well as the chemical reactions and the esterification that occurs. So it's really anybody's guess as to how that's going to mature. We'll just have to see when we're in that older product.
Mm. Yeah. When we start getting into the double figures, that's when we get the limited releases, right?
Well, yeah. Well, we're getting ready to release a 6-year on an age stated 6-year on our wheated bourbon. Our goal was to do that next month, so I think we're probably going to have to delay that a little bit. But we're into a good bit of 6-year right now, and it tastes really great, and it is definitely different than our 4 to 5 year that we've been releasing. I didn't think our 5 year was much different than our 4 year, but you get into the 6 year stuff now that we're into, a few hundred barrels that are 6 years or more. We're really seeing a big difference. So I'm looking real forward to getting that out, as well as, getting on up into 8 years, 10 years plus.
What's the pricing difference going to be on those compared to the 4 year stuff?
We haven't completely settled on that, but I mean, we've tried to be as reasonable as we can on price. I mean, we're whiskey guys. Before we ever had our distillery, we were big whiskey fans, and we're well aware of the effect it has on your pocketbook. And we've always wanted to have products that people could go and afford to buy that second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th, 20th bottle, hopefully. So we're taking all that into consideration and not trying to price gouge or anything like that. We got evaporative loss to consider, and we don't really know what that number is right now on our 6-year-old. Like we do have good numbers on our 4-year-old. On average, we're losing a total of about 20% on average, and there's a range, at 4 to 5 years. So we just kind of have to look at all that kind of stuff, and we're still hashing all that, but we try to be very fair on all that.
Good. Yeah, I think I was impressed by the pricing structures you guys have now. Actually, it does seem very fair. Just another question from Dean again as well, which is quite an interesting question. I'm not sure if this is what experiments do they have in progress that may interest BBS for another pick? So you're doing anything such as finishing, different mash bills, anything different with the wood, anything like that?
Well, we've kind of messed around a little here and there with different things. To make 3 different mash bills is a lot, we have done some 4-grain, and we've got some experiments going on, but on a really small scale. Anytime you're experimenting with something and you already know you're making a good product as is, it's kind of like, what are we trying to do here? I don't know. I won't say that it only gets so good, but at the same time, we've been, playing it real safe with our experimentation. And the other thing about experimenting, you got to have, what's your variable that you're changing in the experiment, and then you got to have negative controls, positive controls. And so, that's just something else that we consider whenever we're doing those experiments. But some things that we've got going on now are varying the barrels a little bit. So we've got whiskey that's in barrels other than independent stave. That would be one, just, it's very limited amount. All of our barrels come from independent stave, and we're completely happy with those quality of those barrels. But we have some experiments going on through independent stave where we're modifying the inside of the barrels. We've even got some experiments going where we've modified the outside of the barrels to try to increase oxygen diffusion into the barrel. So we've actually got some where we've modified, we actually routed out the staves on the outside to, decrease the distance between the outside air and the inside whiskey. And so far, some of those are, I think, coming on 3 years old. And one of our concerns was, is all the whiskey going to leak out of the barrels if we do that? So, so far so good. The barrels actually have whiskey in them still. So that's a good thing. So we'll see how those turn out.
Sounds interesting. We've got a question from Mark Latimer, which is quite a good question. Other than yourselves, of course, which distillery out there are you guys totally in awe of what they are doing and how they are doing it?
That's a tough question. I can't name one Kentucky distillery that we would, have anything, we really enjoy everything everybody's doing. Some of the newer ones, New Riff would be a good example. Rabbit Hole, they're doing really good stuff. And again, Lux Row, it's just Bardstown Bourbon's making some great, I could list all the Kentucky distilleries essentially, but there's some really good stuff coming out of other states as well. I was just in Nevada recently, and there's a state distillery there called Fray's Ranch, and they are growing all their own grains, making all their own whiskey, and they've got thousands of barrels put back, and they are really, really good. Got some really good stuff, and are selling 4+ year old right now. And so there's an example of somebody who's pretty good distance away from Kentucky that's making some great stuff. Firestone Robertson down there in Fort Worth, Texas. That's another really good one. Like I said, Silverback over in Afton, Virginia. Like I said, Reservoir in Virginia. There's just so many different distilleries that are doing good things. It's almost, there's not enough time in the day to taste it all.
Almost.
Let me call out the 5 that I don't like.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to lose any yeast customers today.
Yeah. We got another good question, which I mean, obviously things have changed at the minute. You came over and visited us in Manchester last year.
I still got the same shirt on right now.
Right, sweet.
I haven't taken it off since then.
Nice. Do you think we'll see you guys over here again soon? Obviously, we're not going to be seeing you within the next few months, given the current situation in the world. But any plans to come back and maybe do another tasting in BBS? Maybe we could do one in London and one in Manchester.
Absolutely. Anytime we've ever talked about coming over to Europe. And again, we learned a valuable lesson about the geography of England whenever we came over there. We're in London. You guys are like, yeah. We're like, we'll be right over. What's your address? We're a 3-hour train ride up here to Manchester. So we did it anyway. But, I mean, we really like you guys and really appreciate all the support we've gotten from your group. And anytime we're ever in Europe, I don't care where we're at, we'll make a trip there to see you.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Awesome. Is that all the questions?
That's all. Let me just double check.
Have to go back to talking about movies again, Andy.
Well, yeah.
We got another question actually. We got 2 more questions. One from Larry Sussman. He said he's only tried the BBS pick from this fantastic distillery. What would you recommend he buys next to move up a step from your range?
Well, I have yet to have a bottle of our stuff that wasn't really good, so I don't think you can make a bad decision. But any of the barrel picks that are going out, the groups coming in doing the barrel picks are really good. I mean, I have yet to have a barrel pick. I mean, I'm actually a little jealous that we actually let some of those barrels go once we bottled them. So, I mean, any of the barrel picks are really good. And I mean, that's a really tough question. I don't think you could really go wrong.
Yep, I'd agree with that from what I've tried. We've got one last question from the group, which is, I think you're already doing some rum actually, but are there any plans to expand from doing bourbon and rye at the minute?
Well, the rum that we make is just we buy Kentucky grown sweet sorghum molasses to make our rum, and that's bourbon barrel aged. We've got some of that stuff coming on, 3-4 years old now. So, which shows you we don't sell a lot of it, but it's really good, and that's really only available here. We don't have enough to really start getting it out there, but anybody that comes to visit our distillery, and we highly encourage anyone, anybody in your all's group that wants to come here, don't hesitate to put them in direct contact. I'd be sure to happy to help, show them around and get into some of that stuff.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend anybody who goes over to go and visit you guys. I just think your whole operation is so impressive. It's really, really good. I learned a lot that day. It was really good. Yeah.
Well, the cool thing about your guys' group is what we've noticed is that anytime somebody takes a drink, they post an online review about it. Yeah. So I think we've got in total more reviews from you guys than anybody. So we really appreciate that. Feeling love.
Sweet. Yeah. I think the group, obviously once it tasted your stuff, once it got over here, they've obviously really taken to it, and it's good. I'm happy as well because I when we came back, we were really excited about having been there and getting our whiskey over, which we finally got. Yeah,
that's like a collector's edition over here because it's got that tiny little cork on it.
Yeah, the 700 ml bottle.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, seeing as you've mentioned it, Pat, I'm going to ask, what's your favorite movie?
Man, that's a good question. Probably, that's tough. One of my favorites that I recommend to a lot of people is a Quentin Tarantino movie called U-Turn. You seen that? It's got Sean Penn, and he gets trapped in a town in Arizona. It's got Billy Bob Thornton in it. It's got Jennifer Lopez. It's got Nick Nolte. It's a star-studded cast, but it is a screwed up movie, man. Which is what I like more than anything. Check mark with that one. So, but that one's a really good one. It's called U-Turn.
Right, I think I'm going to add that to my list of copious amounts of stuff to watch over the period. But listen, thanks for coming on, Pat. Really appreciate it. I think hopefully everybody's been watching this and are now going to go and listen to your TED Talk. I know I haven't watched it yet. I'm 100% going to do that. It's been fantastic to have you on. Really appreciate your time.
As well, if you don't mind.
Sorry?
Feel free to share that as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Hashtag Wilderness Trail and all that, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so keep on doing what you're doing. We're loving the whiskey. We're looking forward to what you've got coming next. Hopefully we can. You're going to save us some of those good rye barrels for us to pick next.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to hold you to it.
Yep, we really appreciate everything you guys have done for us. Seriously.
Yeah, we do too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys. We'll wrap it up there. Really, thanks very much. We'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
Cheers.